Get into some politics here in the state of Maryland, maybe in a different way. What is going on with the Republican Party, and are they doing enough to counter Wes Moore and the Democrats in Annapolis? We're pleased to be joined now by Matt Morgan, who's delegate and chairman of the Maryland Freedom Caucus. Good to have you on, delegate. Appreciate your time.
Hey, thank you for having me on.
It's a pleasure because, we like to hear from different points of view. And, we often have the leadership of the Republican Party on. But you've had some issues with leadership. What is going on, and what do you think is a problem, and what would you like to see accomplished more of?
Well, I think the problems between the Maryland Freedom Caucus and the House Republican Caucus is really up to debate. It's just a problem with really style. We'd like to see those guys get a little bit more aggressive and start really coming out and championing the ideas and principles the Republicans run on. I can't help but notice, but all Republicans seem to run on the exact same things. Every Republican seems to run on less taxes, public safety, and traditional American values. And then once they get into office, sometimes they get a little squishy. So we're under the impression that we're in a lot of trouble right now. State's in a huge decline. Republicans in the House caucus has lost a ton in the last two elections. We're down 11 seats from where we were in 2018. And, it's time for Republicans to figure out what time it is.
Delegate Matt Morgan is on board with us, as Brian said, chair of the Maryland Freedom Caucus. It initiated itself last year, and they have 7 members of the Freedom Caucus that he is the chair of. And last week we talked about this, Delegate Morgan, when Delegate Robin Grammer kind of, went off on a rant as he was leaving the floor of the House. I've had that happen to me a couple of times. I just didn't have a microphone at the time, leaving the House or Senate floor. And he was really taken to task, the Republican leadership, for not standing up. What would you like? I hear you saying, certain things, but what would you like to see the leadership do that they're not doing right now? Is there specific, fiscal issues, or what would you like to see them do?
Well, I'll tell you, they have made great strides. From where the Republican House Caucus was a couple years ago to where they're at now, they are improving. And I think that we're responsible for a lot of that. To me, politics, as you know, C4, is the art of persuasion. Mm-hmm. And undoubtedly, every major win that we've accomplished in Annapolis, and I'm talking about recent wins, like the Commons for Kitty bill, mm-hmm. or the California car mandate, or keeping Brandon Shores open, or the Ian Roberts situation, has come from us working really hard, and two, garnishing public support. Because as an elected official, nothing moves you faster than having your constituents call your office. Mm-hmm. And to me, if Republicans are going to have relevance in the state of Maryland, I think that comes with talking more, not less.
Can you give examples of where you think they're being squishy?
Yeah, we've had a couple of examples really of late. We had Republicans walk off the floor. Some of these high-profile debates. I don't think anyone walked off the floor at redistricting, but there were some people getting squishy on the 287G debate as well. We had a Republican walk off the floor last week during a septic system debate. And what happens with these guys is they get in office, instead of sticking with the party or sticking with the majority of their voters, they try to execute some type of individual strategy where they're trying to pass another bill or trying to play favor with the chairman. And honestly, I've just never really seen that work out.
Well, do you think, Delegate Matt Morgan, who joins us chair of the Maryland Freedom Caucus, there's a strategy? We're in an election year, and I've been saying, going back to Bob Ehrlich, who's a very good friend of mine, and I supported him when he ran for governor in 2002, it doesn't seem to be a strategic effort to increase the numbers in the House and Senate in this year's election. Is there discussion of that internally within the House Republicans?
I'm not sure. If there is, I'm not part of those conversations. And I can tell you at the Maryland Freedom Caucus, we have plans to expand the board. Absolutely, this election. My goal is to grow our caucus by at least 3 or 4 members. We want to increase by 50%. And to me, a lot of the problems is you need to clean up your own party before you start worrying about the other party. Mm-hmm. So we're definitely going to make strides this election. We're looking forward to it. And we're going to come out and speak about the principles and ideas that we hold value to. We're going to do it in a smart, strategic, and sophisticated way. And we're going to use social media and the media and do radio shows like I'm on right now with you guys, and we'll see what happens.
There is a feeling that, look, Maryland's different. Like, it's going to be really hard to be a Trump MAGA kind of politician and make inroads in the state and win over Democrats or independents, especially at a statewide election. And so the tactics have to be different in Maryland than, say, even Pennsylvania or obviously, like West Virginia. Do you subscribe to that theory, or do you think that you can win in that way?
I do subscribe to that theory. I do think Maryland's a little bit different. But in the same token, some of these tried and true methods have always been successful. It's the Newt Gingrich quote. And look, I rely a lot on Newt Gingrich's wisdom because, they turned over Congress to Republicans and made them relevant for the first time in 40 years back in the mid-'90s there. And I remember a quote from him is, you can't become the majority if you're on page 11 of the newspaper or not in the newspaper at all. And before we started the Maryland Freedom Caucus, that was the exact situation that we found ourselves in with the Republican House Caucus, where those guys would never, come April 15th or whenever the session ended, you wouldn't hear from those guys for the next 6 months, 9 months. So we've kind of turned that upside down. We've done a lot of media. And in return, the competition has been really, really good, I think. It benefits the party. You see the Republican House Caucus out doing a lot of stuff. You see the Senate caucus all over the place.
Right.
I know you guys have had Justin Reedy on. I would consider him a close ally of mine. Those guys have been doing a really good job. And I think ultimately that's how you win elections. Yeah. You've got to get your ideas out. And look, being in the House, it's been very frustrating that we'll sit there and poll an idea and the polling comes back at 80-20, but somehow we still lose elections. That's something screwed up and messed up.
Well, Delegate Morgan, let me ask you this. If you're using the Newt Gingrich analogy, which, by the way, that was my time when I was in the legislature, then could there be a contract on Maryland like there was a contract on America for Newt Gingrich where you actually take some of the things that you're saying to us now and put them like programmatically into something where people can say, yeah, I think those are good ideas?
Yeah, I absolutely think that could be a solution going forward. Now, I can tell you that I think people are getting a little sick of gimmicks. And really what Republicans and all people want from their elected officials, they want a government that works for them, not against them. They want people that come down on the side of the Maryland public, not just sitting there with talking point after talking point. Let's say we're going to talk about affordability and then do nothing to address affordability.
Now, how about raise taxes while you're talking affordability? How about raise taxes, Delegate, while you're talking affordability?
Well, think about that, C4. Just think about that. The Moore administration comes into office. They inherit a $5.5 billion surplus. They blow all of it in the first 2 years. The third year the second year they raised $453 million of taxes. That's your car registration fees that everyone complains about in that. And then they come back the following year and raise $1.6 billion of taxes, $2 billion of tax increases over 2 years. Now, until we started coming out there and really getting in front of that, that empowered the House Caucus. That empowered the Senate to come out there and start talking about this. And to me, I believe in transparency. So I think that's what people want. They want to be informed. So we're out there, the Maryland Freedom Caucus, trying to provide value, trying to provide good legislation for people to get behind. We started a petition last week dealing with these energy prices. And we've had multi-state hearings. The first, the fruits of that labor came up in Pennsylvania when Pennsylvania actually got out of the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative back in October, something Maryland should do as well. And look, I just think we're standing up for the right things, and people are going to follow along with it.
Well, I could talk to you all day about this, but so how close are you to maybe being in the leadership? There's 7 of you, right? That number could grow. It's not like there are huge numbers of Republicans out there. Is it possible that the Freedom Caucus could become the leadership and be in those positions soon?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess that is possible. It just really depends on what the other caucus members believe. and if they're happy with today's leadership. I know that today's leadership in the Republican House Caucus is substantially behind their fundraising goals that they were 3 years ago when we lost 3 seats. So we ultimately want those guys to be successful.
Right.
We want them to come out there and win seats. We want relevance in this state. And but at some point, you get tired of asking. And I would say that the Maryland Freedom Caucus is more of the doer type caucus.
Last question for me, and that is, it looks like, it is Dan Cox, Ed Hale, John Myrick, maybe. Like, those are your choices right now for Republican candidate for governor of Maryland. They don't light the world on fire. Dan Cox lost by 32. I think he may be more closer affiliated with the Freedom Caucus than anybody else and lost by, a landslide. So how enthralled are you with the choices, and why not somebody from the Freedom Caucus or Freedom Caucus-like getting into the race?
So the Freedom Caucus, we're probably going to only make endorsements in the legislative races that we deem valuable. The governor's race, we're probably going to sit back on the sidelines and just see how this pans out. It's up to these individual candidates to run their race and come out and talk about the ideas and solutions that the Maryland public wants. And I would say that just because Dan Cox got his butt kicked 4 years ago, it's a different situation in Maryland now. So all those candidates that you mentioned are going to have the opportunity to come out and contrast their ideas against their track record of Wes Moore, which the track record has been higher tax increases, less public safety, skyrocketing electric bills.
And a blueprint that is not working, increasing class sizes and having worse outcomes for students at $4 billion a year. Delegate Matt Morgan, chair of the Maryland Freedom Caucus. This is the beginning of a conversation we want to have with you as you contend with what's going on down there. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Delegate. Great to have you on.
Hey, yeah, thanks for having me. I look forward to the next conversation, guys.
Appreciate it. It's going to be interesting to watch this battle, Brian. It's a battle going on.
Yeah, it is.
These delegates.
Although it doesn't seem to be as bad as I thought it might be.
It's not
but
good.
There is definitely a battle going on. Look, there's no way you're going to take over the state of Maryland, but you've got to make small steps in the right direction, and you got to win Senate seats and delegates. You certainly can't lose, and there's no reason that you should.
No, in this climate.
Under the circumstances that we've got right now. All right, coming up, we'll